20th century is the age of electric technology. It's the most dominant tool of our time. And reevaluate.
The obvious thing is the middle thing has two stars. Welcome to the fourth episode of a six-part media investigation. Today, we will be looking into reviews and more broadly, quantification as a medium. Let's get started. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you.
Zeb and Jason. What is your experience? Do you have a history of posting reviews a lot? Do you never post reviews?
I think that Jason and I are both perfect subjects in this direction because I think we're both Google
high-level Google Maps local reviewers.
Yeah, I was caught by the Google Maps like, oh, your reviews are amassing a lot of views, and I got a lot of free stuff from Google, right? But anyway, there is a million people who have seen my reviews on Google, and I used to do a lot of them. More like, oh, does this establishment have wheelchair accessible layouts, or how do you rate your school? You have been there a lot of times. I just deleted that review because it was a bit cringe, if that's still a word we use.
Well, okay, I think this is already interesting because the types of reviews you're giving, this is very factual, right? This is like the information thing, exactly like, is this wheelchair accessible, yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
My reviews are a lot more, I think, emotional, personal. They reveal my truth, you know.
Self-aware.
Yeah, I like, you know, I've written some great negative reviews about just, you know, a swimming pool in Spain. I really hated it. Just but this is already kind of brings me to a first point. And maybe my example I want to give now is this chair.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the chair, yeah, sure.
Okay, it sits terribly. I don't know why. Normally these chairs are better. And now that I can review it and be like, well, this experience is pretty bad. I don't know if I dare to rate it. That's going to be a different problem. But now that I review
Rate it, come on.
Okay, I would really give it a 2 out of 5.
Okay.
Why not a 1 out of 5?
I think there's still, like, the padding is still pretty nice. And the width is good. But the backrest is really too far forward.
And too far forward,
yeah.
Sure.
So this is not comfortable. But now that I've given this review, I think I could really sit in this chair for 2 hours. Because now I've made it part of my experience. I've used this review to really claim it. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of this review. More so than I would out of a good chair.
So this is interesting. So you say that the enjoyment that you get from the review changes your relationship with the chair.
Exactly. And I think reviewing something lets you keep doing it. Like the terrible Spanish swimming pool, I had so much enjoyment out of writing my review and then reading other people's reviews. I thought I could probably come back here and just do it again. Just sit here writing another review.
Okay, but now you're getting ahead. So I want to come back to this point, but first, let's step back. Oh, wait, you have coffee. How's the coffee? this looks horrible.
I have a beautiful Maaswater, as Arthur lovely calls it. This is the coffee, as far as we can call it coffee, from our university, from the beautiful dispensaries. I think it's 64 cents these days. When I came in, it was like 30 cents. So inflation is a real thing. But I think that when we started conceptualizing this episode, Arthur and I immediately came to the conclusion that this is pretty good. And don't get me wrong, it's a terrible coffee. It's terrible. But it is really good in the sense that, you know, you're studying all these really high level concepts and you really get a new view of the world. And then in your break, you go to this really shitty coffee machine and you just get the worst coffee in the world. And that makes it really good because you don't expect a good coffee. I've started to love this soup.
Yeah, and it's like the paradox is here. The subjective experience of drinking the coffee is good because maybe the quality is so bad, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's so pure in its badness. It doesn't pretend to be good coffee. I once had an idea to put like QR codes on every coffee machine and then measure the person's experience of the foam and the crema and the amount, and then put that in like a data sheet and a website linked to it that people could open the website and be like, coffee machine 3 in Lipsius is the best coffee machine right now. But I think that reflecting on it now goes beyond the experience, that it is this horrible commodity that I love because of its badness, because we can look at it as this commodity rather than as a cup of coffee. It is not a cup of coffee. It is my break energizer. I think I've just removed it from the coffee by quantifying it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to just show some reviews because also to the viewer or the listener, I think it's important to take a step back and see like what are we actually looking. So the question I now want to start answering is, what does a review say? And then I want to kind of start to problematize this because I know that we all three think there are some problems with the review, but as we have talked besides the recording yet, we disagree on where exactly the problem lies, right? So now I just want to take a quick look at some of the reviews. Let's see what we see and then discuss what it actually says about the review. What do we see here?
Toothbrushes, Oral-B, and a Kruidvat toothbrush. Clearly the Kruidvat one is better because it has a full 5 stars.
Almost,
and it's even
almost.
sold out. It's so good that there's none more left.
So this I find interesting because here you have two products. One is like at least maybe like triple times as expensive. Actually, I was browsing for this. I bought the right one. It works.
The right one, and the right one was the right one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so much better.
And it's interesting because I want to show, okay, so what does this say? You could say the right one is just better, but I think here you make a mistake because the expectations for the right one are clearly lower than for the left one. If you look at the right one, you think, okay, I want a cheap one. If it works, I'm very happy. I'll give it 5 stars. I would give it 5 stars because I don't want any crazy stuff. I just want to brush my teeth. No problems. But the left one, oh, I don't know what it can do, but it probably has like 100 functions that I would never use. But someone else really buys this toothbrush for those functions. For instance, I can watch in an app how good am I doing it. Like, I don't know, I can imagine that it has that function. And then if the app doesn't work right, then if I had that expectation of, oh, I want it for the app, I would give it 3 stars, maybe. Because it sells a different promise.
I would claim here then, in the way the review kind of affects yourself, is that the discrepancy in ratings comes from the fact that when you buy the really expensive toothbrush, maybe the best function you buy is the right to give a terrible review. The right to say, no, it, the timer on the, when it vibrates to tell you it's off by 2 seconds. What the fuck? This gets a 2-star. Something like that. And I think you buy that right to enjoyment when you buy really expensive stuff.
So I have this review. It's on Google Maps. And what it basically says is, you can read it if it's on the video, if you're watching it from a video. But what it basically says, oh, I had this amazing experience in a place where you get coffee and croissants. And it was just so good. And it's from someone who traveled there. And it's like, what a pity. It's so far from home. I visit every day. Make it a habit and be happy forever. I just want to show, and then we can start to talk. But for me, I wanted to show this because it's such a it's not the quantification, but this is actually the content about the explanation. But not every 5-star is like this. I think that's my main takeaway from here. Not every 5-star says, oh, make it a habit and be happy forever. No, someone else just gets a quick coffee, says, oh, it's good, 5-star. So we already have seen now, basically in I don't know how many minutes, that you say the review does something more than just project, okay, this is the quality of the experience, this is the experience, and that means that the review will be like this, and that captures accurately the experience. It does more than that. And now the question is, how much more does the review do than just capture the experience? Right? Because you said, okay, actually writing a bad review gives me a good feeling.
Yeah.
And we also like, And then my interpretation, maybe we can already get started on that. I would say the product is really bad in measured in some metrics, but actually the experience is good. And I would then say, well, does that make the product bad exactly?
Can I look
Yeah.
in on this? Because I think the first time I tried this, I was thinking, oh my God, this is going to be 4 years of my life drinking this shit. But in talking to my friends about it, in creating a ritual out of going for a coffee every time we go for a break, we changed our way of looking at it by subjectifying it, by quantifying it in a subjective way. We changed our relation to it from this is horrible to I love it being horrible.
And then the putridness of the coffee becomes part of the ritual, of the enjoyment. And I do think here's the point to talk about. Maybe I problematize the reasons for giving a review. Like, you really do it so you can keep enjoying it. You really hate the coffee so you can keep enjoying it. But in this, I don't know, this process where you start and you say, oh, I hate this, and then you enjoy it, and then it becomes a ritual. I mean, you have drawn, in my opinion, such a true experience of this coffee, because I can relate to this. I can say, yeah, this is right. And this is why opening up this conversation where you can move from, okay, well, it's disgusting, but it becomes a ritual. I think this works really well. I think we find the problem in where we leave a rating. I had an example, I sent it on WhatsApp to you, of there's this parking place and they give you fines constantly, and then you can give a 1-star rating, and that's it, then you're done with it, right?
Yeah, it's like the fietsweg storage in every city, right?
Yeah.
They have the worst rating I've ever seen anywhere. And it's not because it's such a bad place. It's just because people are so annoyed that they come back to their bike in the city and the bike is gone, and then they have to go out. Like, the experience that leads to that place is the bad part. And that's what people leave a bad review for.
Yeah. And then the rating is it's just simply a way to make yourself feel a bit better. But when the review starts, well, actually, I think this is a terrible example. I would much rather give my example of, for example, using Letterboxd. There, I think you really feel the problem, because a review, then you can just watch a shit movie, and a rating, I should say. A rating is just a way to, I don't know, get a bit of a discount on that. I saw a shit movie, but I can at least give a bad rating.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got some of my enjoyment back. But when you leave a review, I think you can find something, because you can discover your own experience, access it through the review.
But do you find the truth in there?
Yes, because...
Or do you create a truth in there?
Oh, I think you find the truth in there.
And I think you created truth in there. One of my favorite movies, well, 2 of my favorite movies, are both dog shit. One is Miami Connection. I love that movie because it's so bad, because it's so gory, because there's not really a plot to it. I love movies where you really can draw out your own plot. And I think it's a creation of truth in that sense. Don't Mess with the Zohan, one of my other favorite movies. Horrible Adam Sandler movie about him being a Mossad secret super agent who is oversexed and wants to become a hairdresser in New York. And he has an arch nemesis who is from not Hamas but the Lebanese organization. And then the movie ends with them singing together to destroy the American capitalists. And I just see this as the only movie that adequately tackles the whole problem with Israel-Palestine. I think that this horrible 2009 movie could be the solution. I watch it with my friends. I tell them for an hour about what I see in the movie, and then we watch it. So I quantified it for myself, right? I subjectified my experience into a narrative. We're back at the word narrative.
Yeah.
A narrative that I can believe in. So I created truth. I have like a will to, well, if you pull Nietzsche there, like it's not a will to the truth, but a will to power that creates your own truth, right? It's your own facticity that you create in it.
And does that mean, actually, coming back to the narrative, that the experience gets its quality from the narrative? in that experience, so that the
Yeah.
experience is not just some innocent, pure thing.
I think experience is never innocent and pure. You love what's the guy's name?
Now I'm afraid.
Rory
Oh,
Sutherland.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
And I think what he really shows, I think he has a beautiful analogy that they were spending billions of euros making the Channel Tunnel, the train, 10% faster. And then he was like, well, if you just spend a tenth of this budget on having really pretty women serving champagne on the trip, then the subjective experience will be manyfold better than making the trip shorter. And he always poses it from this narrative of like, I am a marketeer. Marketeers are not central to companies' ideologies. And that's where, for example, this kind of insight is not seen by a company, right?
Yeah, and I want to hinge on this right away because so the example of the train is good, but I think you need to unpack it to really see what's really there. It's not just that you get the make the experience better so that people don't complain, so that people don't leave 1-star reviews about the train. His argument actually is that there is no objective value.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the experience itself. And if you can change the experience, you actually change the value.
Yeah.
So, for instance, IKEA has at the end you get cheap hot dogs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's a clear strategy to design for experience, because basically you can draw a curve, blah blah blah. The peak and the end is most notable for your experience, what you remember.
Mm-hmm.
What does the review say? My claim would be, well, you have to be careful saying anything about that, because the question is, are you really measuring the experience? What are you measuring? But I think the peak end thing says also, if you expand it further, that you can manipulate very easily in experience.
Mm.
And that, but then the question is there a difference between the objective value and the subjective value?
Mm. And you would say there is not.
Yeah, because I think when you go into this process of the discussion, the review is, I think, in its good form, an opening to a discussion in which you, first of all, have to discuss with yourself. Because I think if you watch a movie and then just don't say anything about it, I think you're losing something, for sure. I think you have to at least write or talk out loud to yourself to access actually your own experience. Now, of course, the first thing is, okay, well, the way you access your experience is, of course, covered through by the medium you access it through. The fact that I review on Letterboxd and maybe the people who follow me, instead of saying it out loud to myself or going to a discussion, that, of course, colors something already. But I think once you're on your way, you're in a process of coming towards the truth. The way I think this is collapsed completely is by the rating, because there's just no discussion. It's just a number. You put it there. For example, I on Letterboxd, I already think if you believe, like, if you get to think too much about the rating, you're really, really losing a lot.
And there's even a step below that. I have used Letterboxd periodically, but I guess just got so obsessed with looking at the top 250 movies list or whatever and clicking everything that I have watched and then watching movies so that more of that list for me is filled out. I think that quantification that does, that you also see, for example, in a Snapchat streak or in a Duolingo streak, or I think it just takes away from your ability to think for yourself, to allow yourself to think, because it, for me at least, it puts me into this box where I just have to quantify myself according to a supposed way of doing the thing. I need to have watched the top 100, 250 best movies in the world because those are the best movies in the world. And I feel like me as a person who is trying to be engaged with the world needs to have seen this. Right? So I think the second level of quantification there, like the rating makes your devalues your experience. But I think that the watched button that I get so obsessed by devalues my experience even more, because I don't watch movies because I'm interested in the movie, because I'm interested in having the movies checked off on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
And that's the creative thing. I just want to get a quickly thing in, because now I think we can, after this, it's like we get the picture complete. Because look at this review, right? So I ordered this recently. It's a dip belt, so you can do dips with weight. But look, so it's all a bit more reviews. So what do you see immediately? The obvious thing is the middle thing has 2-star. And if you just browse it unconsciously, I think for sure you're not gonna get that one.
I think what I noticed more immediately is that the middle one has a really bad picture. I think the other two pictures are way more exciting than the middle one. The middle one has a bad explanation of the product. They filled out that it's 1 gram. Don't think it's 1 gram. I think they put it down as a weight and then had to put it down as not a weight. But sure.
Now what you just did is you kind of found out that this belt is terrible through everything but the rating. That's interesting. But
the question is, even if it's good, I think I can admit subconsciously I would still be very hesitant. But then sometimes you look at the review and you see that the review is not any good. But
let's see the review.
Yeah, so this is the review.
Quality was disappointing. The chain is sprayed so that it is already damaged after 1 use. Also a pity that the chain cannot be detached on one side by carb hooks with carbine hooks, but it's only on one side. Does not meet the expectation. It's poor quality and quality.
Well, it's just...
it's weird, right? He says poor quality and quality, and his name is Shrin and Shrin and Shrin.
Yeah, but I believe him more now that I read this. This sounds like it probably really happened.
Yeah, but this sounds like you would never give this belt even a chance, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of the maybe... Is it positive? Because I feel like the 2-star makes me sure I'm not going to buy this thing. Like if this would be like €5, right?
Yeah.
€5.
Yeah, it's the most expensive one as well.
Yeah, exactly. But if this would have been like €5, but then the question is, how will the reviews be the same?
And you would say that he wouldn't have left that review if it was cheap.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
So maybe the case is a stupid case. That's the question. Because I'm sure there will be some people listening to this and say, whatever critique we are going to have, because I know we are all very critical, it's just going to say, oh, it's just a mistake by... It's just like you're doing, I don't know, not statistics or anything, like oh, if it has under so many reviews, then the review is not significantly reliable or blah, blah, blah. Because that's also, I want to maybe skip directly to this part then. There was another mode of quantification is multiple choice questions, right? And so you had this report I was reading yesterday from the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, which kind of gives advice on how to make a good multiple choice test. So it says it has to be roughly 40 questions. You know, they say actually you need 3 alternatives instead of 4. It's all better, blah, blah, blah. And so they explain the quantification. But I think, I don't know if you agree with me on that, I still see a problem with multiple choice questions as not reliable.
Yeah, and I think that this goes in more deeply. We both did a study before this where we are quite deep in the social scientific way of measuring, right? I have done field research where you go out into the city and you want to, I don't know, we were measuring the shopping experience in a certain street in Amsterdam. So what do? You create a test with a Likert scale, so 1 through 5, and then you create all these questions which have no sense to the person you ask them. And it's like, so what is the subjective experience that you have in this street? How highly would you rate the depth of your shopping experience or the breadth of the stores that you have here? And those are all things that you want to measure, right? You want to know what kind of stores are there or whether the stores are specialistic enough. That's the kind of things that you want to measure in a, for example, a marketing or a social research. But the way that you quantify it, I think most people don't even understand the questions. When you get called like, yo, you want to join this discussion or you want to join this research by P&O or by whatever research instance, I just think that doesn't really
I
work.
want to embodied this so much. I also indeed, for me it was design. And basically the first thing they said to us was, you can never ask people what they want. And then they have the quote from Henry Ford. If I asked people what they wanted, they would say faster horses. And then of course, no, but the car is different. So, but I think this goes, oh my God, I get crazy even thinking about it, because I think for us streets, it just sounds so stupid to try to quantify an experience and to argue that that quantification accurately describes someone's experience, right? Like, can we agree on this point so far? Or like, what are the conditions for this to be true?
I think there are times where it is. I also think that it's kind of a will to power. I think that if you do a psychological research and you walk away from it, that is the way that you believe a certain thing at that moment, right? I think the Stanford prison experience, the people walked away from that experience probably thinking that we are all really bad people. That just shows how that experiment, which doesn't portray maybe like the truth about human behavior, has probably altered their experience because they were ending up beating each other and fighting with one another, right? Then the Stanford prison experiment is done again, and then people say, well, it doesn't work like this. Sure, maybe your research is better, maybe your research methodology is better, but if you are in a situation where you have 20 people and they all beat each other and they want to do the most sadistic shit to each other ever, then your truth will be, this is horrible and people are horrible. Isn't that what we should gauge from the Stanford prison experiment, instead of there is a truth about the human being?
I don't think the Stanford prison experiment is a true truth. But,
Exactly. That's the common notion, right? That it has been disproven, that it has been used as a way to show how people are, and then they have redone the experiment, and now it's basically seen as this way to show that psychological experiments are really hard to draw like an objective claim from, right? But I think what it shows even more is that your subjective experiments will alter you as what you think is your objective experience.
I think the lack of truth that we find in something like the Stanford prison experiment, or the entire field of psychology, is only the quantification, the fact that they're trying to find the soul through the just the aesthetic of physics. I have to protect this aesthetic. Don't do it on humans. Maybe do it on stars, and then you can tell yourself you know something about stars. But it just doesn't work on people at all. I think that's a methodological fault. But I do think, and it's the same with movies. You just can't do it because how many stars is a movie? Well, that sentence doesn't really mean anything. But I do think that if you do it with, I don't know if I want to commit to there being a truth about human nature, but if you do it through discussion, and if you drop the multiple choice, the question formulaires that you guys were so taught to use before, and drop the star ratings and open the discussion. And this is why more reviews doesn't work. But one review with a comment section and people disagreeing with each other, there, I can work with that. Or reviewing it to someone and then they say, oh, no, you're an idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. And then, you work on that. I think that's something you can really work with, and I think that's something you can find a truth outside of you. Because you use it to access yourself, but in the way you do that and in the way it responds to others, I do think there's something you get to. I think there's something so beautiful about a discussion in the comment sections.
Yeah, but you create that truth.
No, I think I think if you really have a full discussion, there's something people are reaching at.
I think they're not.
But this is I think we have to really dig into it now, because
Yeah.
this is something we've been playing around for almost, I think this is the fourth episode.
Yeah.
Is it there? Does it exist there? Because we are analyzing the media and we are constantly ending up with, is there a truth about how it really is?
Yeah.
Can we get a method to get as close as possible to this truth? Or is that a flaw?
Because if we go back to the first episode where we set out the landscape, right? We have this guy called Marshall McLuhan, and he tries to find an essence of media, right? I think that there's a big difference between there being an essence and there being a truth to a media, right? The review doesn't find the truth, but it creates the truth. So the essence of the review is that it affects your subjectivity, that it changes your subjectivity through your second order observation. But I think what you're trying to say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is there is a truth to the review if it's done in a correct way, because then it can find the truth instead of create the truth that is out there.
Yes, except, asterisk, at the very least, it's a movement towards truth.
Sure.
You don't get there, of course. But yeah, I think there is some truth. And this is kind of maybe the same thing I said also. If you are looking back to the first episode, we had this thing where I say, the podcast as a discussion will be emancipatory, because I do think you make space for a movement.
But that movement, I think, is only useful for us. And it's useful for us because we create something that we can attach ourselves to in it. And I think that the truth, of course, like I'm not saying that we don't experience things and we're not in a world where there are a lot of rules and metaphysical realities that have to be presupposed to be in this world. But I'm more saying that our brain works in a way where we can create our affection towards something in a way that goes beyond this is how it should be and this is how it should not be.
Well, okay, I want to dig into this in opposition quickly, because I think good is on the side of movement, progression, radical politics. Wearing a keffiyeh on a podcast, well, I don't know how radical that is, but that's why I think a vox pop, there is a true narrative there when you have the narrative that evokes movement of the people, right? And I think you maybe even feel it more with the review versus rating, because there's evil in the rating in the way that it just closes up movement completely.
What I'm immediately thinking is, you are in this bubble, in this echo chamber. I'm using a lot of bad words, right? That enforces your beliefs and that enforces your narrative. You went to a protest yesterday and all the people around you believe about the good in ending the Gaza conflict, right? Now, I do have sympathies to the demonstrations towards Gaza. But I think that the structure that creates this, in some aspects, is a very subjective one. You yesterday were scolding, you as the protesters, fuck the police, all the police are pigs. I think that is a will to power that you guys are outing. And yeah, that's one of the reasons that you guys get beat the fuck up.
And this is, I think, this is something from another episode. I think you said that. You are there and you already know you're getting it framed. You're getting framed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you frame yourself and you get framed. And in you getting framed, you also frame the other. In you having this radical opposition, this one rioting group with face masks and the other rioting group with shields and batons, I think that framing is so pure there that there is good for the police, because they're with their people. They're all with walkie-talkies in. They have a leader who's saying, now you have to charge. And you guys are framed as the evil. And for you guys, the police are framed as the evil. But I think if you're talking to Dirk, the policeman, one-on-one, who was yesterday literally beating your ass, you would have a really good discussion.
Okay, so I have two interesting things here, because I think absolutely there is this framing. There's this framing on both sides, and on both sides you can't stand on both sides of the grass, because the really
bystander
important
effect.
thing, because of course thinking that you're outside of the frame and you're looking on is another part of the
Another
frame,
frame,
another
yeah.
role. But the really important part of activism is how aware you have to be of your role. And that's right. I think you mentioned it from the Vox Pop episode. When we talk to the people from Students for Palestine, they are so aware of it. You know, you kind of want to be abused by the police a bit, because then that gets in the news. And when it's just the right amount, then there will be more people who are mad.
And if the police act badly, then
Yeah.
you get in the news in the right way, in your news in the right way. And if you guys in the most general way go into the Routers Island campus and destroy all the coffee machines and all the computer screens, then the other narrative has a way to get framed rightly,
Yeah.
right?
And the way I claim that I escape this and get to truth is that I have to go back to, there's the good of movement and the evil of static. And well, the police are an instrument of fascism. They will stop movement, and that is the side of evil. And there is the framing, and you play with the framing. You have to play with the framing, and that's what I think that was the goal of our news video, is the way you play with it and what it evokes, the movement or staticity it evokes, is where you find the truth. The true narrative is the narrative that makes someone join the protest tomorrow. That would be my claim. And the other thing I wanted to mention, because you can have the dialogue with the police officer. There, I think it's important to remember the framing, because we were locked in buses for like 6 hours, and there were really charming police officers who were joking around with everyone and so nice. And then when you're denied water and bread and movement for a while, and then there comes the one. Then there comes the good cop, and he says like, yeah, I can get you water. I can get you a paracetamol even. And then you're like, wow, this guy is so nice. And then you talk with him a bit, he jokes around. But the good thing, the person I was with in that bus reminded me and us of, no, all cops are bastard. He's still in his role. He's still inside this frame. When you think you escape the frame in this nice discussion, it could still be in the frame. It could just be the good cop.
And here I just want to drop a quick comment. Can you not see the good in this like little moment? And in all the narratives, there's maybe it's a bit
Created
naive.
good.
Yeah. Okay.
I felt the
Great.
good.
Okay.
I thought he was so nice, but then also, I don't know if I
I think
can
that
see
he
the
would
good.
have exactly the same. This protester was actually like a nice young kid who is trying to engage with the world. And then his colleagues are like, well, but they were still destroying doors in a university building.
Yeah.
I
But he
don't
was
see
nice.
I don't see a necessary difference in that.
But in the end, the role he takes on is the one that locks us in a bus.
Yeah, and the role that you take on is the role for them that destroys the university building and fights with the neutrality and the peace that is in the university.
Absolutely.
A
But I
question
think my
for-
role is on the side of movement.
Yeah.
A question for Zep then. Are those two framings or those two narrative incommensurable with each other? Can they not have any dialogue?
Incommensurable.
Incommensurable. Yeah, thank you.
I think they can, and they should. But I think that in the situation that you guys put yourself in, and the police puts themselves in, there is of course no dialogue possible. If you're in your bus and everybody in your bus, Faye, is saying, remember, they are still pigs.
Well-
And if they are in their bureau and they're like, oh, I spoke to this nice kid, he wanted some water, he has a headache. And they are saying, well, they're still vandalists. Of course, that will prohibit you, right?
Because the funny thing is that most people in the bus didn't remember to stick to their roles. But what I was going to say is, no, I don't think the dialogue is possible because there's truth on one side. And the other side
But
is
Jason,
a role
think back to the
excluded
first
from
think
truth.
back to the first episode. What did you say there? the only way to really act is through dialogue.
It's through dialogue because dialogue allows movement. But there can be roles, I think, that just exclude movement altogether when you are in those roles.
I see something here. And
A dialogue, that's what you see. A creation of truth, that's what you see.
well, that's what you say, but I find it interesting because you have your view of different narratives, right?
Mhm.
That there's different narratives, and within the narrative, another perspective is framed in a certain way. And this is true for every narrative. So every narrative, you get framed with this way, you get framed this way, blah, 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 blah. But my question is, are you then saying that this view is true? Because then it seems that you're not disagreeing too much with each other, because you're saying like there's still the truth, namely a true way of viewing all the narratives. Or is that, you know what I mean? Like, is because you're saying, oh, there's one good dialogue, a dialogue that is good, a dialogue
That
a way
goes
of
towards the good.
going towards the good. So the maybe there's like a part. Some narratives are good, and then you can still have a difference. But still, you say that there's some narratives are really bad, but that's not what you're saying.
Because I think, for example, our discussion, we are finding truth in this because we're not in roles that exclude any movement or truth.
We're
I think.
creating.
So this is the
finding it.
difference, right? Finding or creating. But I want to bring it back to finish and to end with the review, because here we have finding the truth, creating the truth,
Mhm.
and I think that's just, you can apply it to not just reviews but a lot, right? It's, are you gonna find the truth, or are you gonna create the truth? Are you gonna have a multiple choice question and you're gonna find, like, if someone actually knows it, or do you create a certain knowledge that people maybe get? Maybe this is too far. Maybe this is, I think
I
this
think
is
the
too
multiple choice question is not the
it's
right
not- okay, it's
way
not
to put it, because in making a multiple choice question, you already, right? If you are an examiner, you already have a certain way of understanding that you presuppose. Like,
But that's exactly what I
basically-
mean. Like, if someone gets the multiple choice, it's not just a measuring thing of knowledge. You
Mhm.
create a whole new system, right?
Yeah, it's a testing of how deep you are in the narrative.
How much do you agree with how we present the facts?
Yeah. If you're a psychology professor, psychology, there's a lot of multiple choice tests because there are just so many students. You have this whole book, 1,000 pages. You ask your students to study it, and then you ask 50 multiple choice questions, and that gives a grade. That grade basically says, how good do you know what is written in this book about the tests that we have conducted and that way that we have interpreted those tests, right? That's basically what the multiple choice question.
And that's
Poses.
a narrative that you create.
And of course, like, certain behavioral elements to these tests will be the way that our brains are wired and our subjects act in a general way. But I think that there's still a big leap to say that that is the truth.
Yeah, because the mind-body dualism. Well, I think in here we have 3 philosophy students. I think we see problems in that, at least, right?
Yeah, of course, psychologists do as well.
But like, okay, no, it's enough, I think, because I think we have to get finished, and then I think next episode we can get again to the spice, to the deepness of the different narratives, because then we're going to talk about documentaries, right? And so then we get the narratives on steroids, or not. That's to be determined.
And
So
we'll try to find the truth on that in documentaries.
We'll try to create a truth about.
and then maybe at the last episode we can again revisit, and we're going to ask ourselves, well, is the whole podcast about truth or about narrative creation? Maybe. We'll see. We'll see if we can agree with that. We leave it at this, and I want to thank you very much, Ep. I want to thank Jason. Well, I'm also in a narrative. I'm the host here. And as a narrative...
What is your narrative, Arthur?
My narrative is that we are ending the discussion, and we will talk and see each other next time. Ciao.
The method slot.